thank you for being here, but thank you for making the choice to be here. I know most of you worked long days. All of you had different options for tonight to go spend some time with your family, to do any number of things. And you chose to come to be involved in a conversation about the country, about your communities, about where we're going, about what we need to do together to make sure we're tackling the future with all the right abilities, all the right tools, and all the right people doing the right things. And this is something that I love doing. I love having the opportunity to engage in town halls like this, because as much as part of it's about me sharing my thinking and sharing the approaches I take to big challenges and questions, a lot of it is me hearing directly from you about your concerns, about the things that are on your minds, about where you disagree with me, where you agree with me, where we need to do a little more of this or more or less of that. These kinds of conversations are at the core of what politics should be all about. Because politics, which gets a bad rap a lot of times these days, should be simply, at its simplest expression, how we choose to organize ourselves as communities, as a country, to prepare for the future that's coming. And what we are living through right now is a time in which those conversations are more important than ever, because people are rightly a little bit anxious about where we are and where we're going, not just as a country, not just as communities, but as a world. We're seeing a level of uncertainty and disruption in the world around us, of transformation, of acceleration of the pace of change that is really destabilizing. So whether it's the transformation and the challenges that are coming with climate change that have been over years, but that you're increasingly seeing tangibly in extreme weather events and challenges to communities and people around the world, whether it's the challenge of the pandemic, that had us all disrupted in very real ways as we adjusted to different ways of doing things, and leaves lingering challenges afterwards in terms of how our mental health is, how our supply chains are operating. We're living through a time where the war in Europe, the illegal invasion of Ukraine by Russia, has a huge impact, both because we're seeing disruption, we're seeing hikes in food prices and fertilizer costs, in energy prices because of what Russia's doing. But we're also seeing uncertainty around how strong our democracies are and will be. We're seeing an erosion as a authoritarian government has decided to invade a peaceful neighbor and redraw lines on the map just because they have a bigger army than their neighbor. And that causes a lot of uncertainty. Layer onto that the inflation challenges we have, the interest rates challenges. People are really worried about where they're going, about where their communities are going, and how we're going to build that better future. And all those problems, all those challenges, which are interwoven and impact each other and amplify each other, none of them have simple solutions. None of the ways to solve for these challenges that we're facing in the future can fit on a bumper sticker or in a tweet or in a TikTok video. And yet so much of what politics is these days is, the outraged generation, the simple solution, the amplification of social media without actually leaning in on the hard work of solving those challenges. And you all know from the challenges you're facing in your lives that those simple solutions to complex problems very rarely actually pan out as being the right solutions. So how we choose to engage as citizens in a democracy, how we choose to listen to or challenge the people who are in these jobs to serve you, to represent you, to try and articulate the best of democracy by saying this is what we're doing together, this is the direction we're going, and you guys get to pick from different parties and different visions to align with what is best for you. That requires a level of openness to each other, to listening, to engaging. And that's why I'm so glad to be here. And I certainly look forward to a huge range of questions. Yes, they can be related to the Manitoba building trades and union issues. But really, whatever it is on your mind as things that are bugging you or worrying about or things that you want to ask me about or challenge me on, please. That's what this opportunity is about. I'm really looking forward to it. But before I do, I just want to say, because I'm here in a union hall, I want to say a couple things about labor in this country. Back in 2015, when I first got elected, we had seen for 10 years a government that didn't do a very good job of working with labor. Perhaps the best examples of that, and some of you will remember it, were the anti-union legislations they brought in, 525 and 377, which was all about making it harder for people to organize into unions, making it harder for unions to actually be able to function effectively. And it was something that the right-wing base under Harper really wanted to push. And we made a commitment, because we believed in labor, that was one of the first things we do to repeal that legislation, and we did. But that wasn't why we did it. We did it because the entire focus of our campaign and of my choosing to get into politics and becoming a leader is to make sure that we start to turn around the hollowing out of the middle class that we've seen across Western democracies, across so many of our countries around the world, where the rising tide no longer lifts all boats, where even as the economy grows, the richest get richer, and the middle class, instead of benefiting, tends to fall out of the middle class as often as it moves forward. And that has very real consequences. When people feel that the idea of progress that Canada was built on, that so many of our countries was built on, that the hard work of one generation creates opportunities for the next generation to do even better, when that suddenly breaks, when you're genuinely worried that maybe your kids won't have the kinds of opportunities that your parents' hard work were able to give to you, there's a break in the promise of progress, in the social contract that we're supposed to have as a country. And we tried to focus very much, and have been focused over the past 8 years, on trying to turn that around. Because when people are anxious, when people are worried, as a political leader, you have two choices. You can show people that you empathize with them and reflect back that anger to them and say, yes, I know how angry you are. You should be angry. The system's broken. It's keeping you down. Let's all be angry together. And you can amplify that anger. And it can mobilize very effectively, especially in this era of social media, to get people out angry at the polls, get people out and involved and shouting against things. What that kind of anger amplification can't do is actually solve for the problems we're facing. And what we've been focused on is exactly that. Doing away with the trickle-down theory that the right wing continues to believe in. That if you give better tax breaks to the rich and let people keep more of their income instead of raising taxes on them, then the middle class will trickle down, where you get money trickling down to the middle class, and the richest will create more jobs, and the whole economy will work. Well, it doesn't work. That's never worked. Trickle down doesn't work. So what we've been focused on is growing the economy from the middle out, from the bottom up. That means making sure everybody has a chance to succeed. And it means investing in things like the UTIP program, the Union and Trades Building and training centers. That has allowed more people to join the trades. It's investing in infrastructure in ways that have created more opportunities for the building trades across the country in so many different ways. It's listening to you all and knowing that moving forward on the mobility tax credit, when you have to shift to a job site, whether it's in Fort McMurray or across Ontario, that you're able to deduct some of your travel expenses. We doubled our tools expenses deduction this year, because that's part of the work that you guys need to be able to do. We've continued to look at how we can make sure we're doing things better. And even as we're moving towards building a cleaner, greener economy, for the first time ever, on the infrastructure for critical minerals, on hydrogen, on carbon capture technology, on clean electricity. If companies want to benefit from the maximal tax credits we're putting forward, for the first time, we put in labor requirements for salaries, for benefits, for treating people right to create good jobs for the future. These are things that we've done because we know that you can only build strong, cohesive communities if people have confidence that the future, as uncertain as it is, has room for their success in it. Only if people can see themselves in their future. But that, of course, is a longer conversation than let's tear it all down and start again. And it requires hard work. But if there's anyone who knows what you can build when you put in the hard work, it's the folks here in this room, in the building trades, who know what kind of work it goes into building a new structure, building a strong foundation and a successful building on top of it. It takes that hard work. It takes that grinding away. It takes that building. It takes that seriousness. You can't cut corners. You can't yell your way into building it. You actually have to do the work. And that's what we've been focused on for many years, but that's why I'm so pleased to be able to be here tonight to hear your perspective on what we're doing right, what we're not doing right, and where you think we could be doing more or differently. So I'm going to get into taking your questions now. What I'll do is I'll start in this section here and then go all the way around the room. And you can ask me questions about whatever it is you like. Look forward to getting into it, and we'll just take it off. Anyone from this section with a question for me? Well, that's all the leadership, so you guys, yeah, go ahead. Here, just stand up and remind us your name. Sorry, what's your name? James, that's right.
Is this good to go? Okay.
There you go.
So in our local, we do an initiative called Tax Fraud Days of Action, and we're actually in it right now, so I feel a little bit obligated to ask. The dirty contractor who doesn't pay his taxes, we have a few that are on our radar. At the federal level, what are we doing to eliminate contractors like that to help the good contractor, which our unions deal with?
That's a great question. We are seeing, unfortunately, in some parts of the country, and may well be here, an actual rise in people choosing to pay cash, using work that's under the table, sometimes hiring people who are not qualified to do the jobs, and putting themselves and everyone else at risk. There are limited tools we have directly at the federal level to do that. A lot of that is around provincial contracting. But one of the things that we can do, and we have been looking at, for example, when we put forward things like the home retrofit program, right? You only get the tax benefits of putting in new windows or better insulation if you can show the receipts. And that has done a lot. The goal of it was about, having people save money and upgrade their homes and be more environmental. But it actually had an impact when it was brought in on reducing the number of under-the-table contractors that we're using. And some of the other things we're doing, whether it's around procurement for federal work or just cracking down on tax fraud in general. There's a lot of things that we can do, but there has to be that's why it's so great that you're doing the awareness campaign and the days of action. People understanding that they're putting themselves and their community at risk by trying to save a little money under the table. But at the same time, things are expensive right now. And one of the best things we can do is keep working to bring inflation down as we're doing. It's going to come down to probably 3%, they're saying, over the summer, which would be a really good thing if that happens. Making sure we're supporting people with things like the grocery rebate we've had right now, so that they're not, faced with impossible choices as they move forward. So making sure there's more prosperity, making sure that people are actually engaging in the right way, and yes, leaning in on structures to make sure that what happens under the table and dirty contracting doesn't succeed so much. Thank you for that, James. Another question. Here, go ahead.
Mr. Prime Minister. Adam Melnick with the Heat and Frost Insulators. I want to, on behalf of our membership across Canada, I want to thank you for the efforts in the budget, labor and mobility tax deduction, continued investment in UTIP. I used to be an apprenticeship instructor. I appreciate all of that. As the next generation enters the workforce and is going to be there to retrofit and modernize these buildings, reduce emissions, that's fantastic. And I want to thank you as we celebrate these pieces of the budget. I also want to celebrate the fact, once again with you, the banning of asbestos. But I'm going to put an ask on you, just like our colleague in the past, Ms. Fred Claire, asked you. We got the ban in 2018. I want to ask this government, I want to ask you and your government, if you can find some mechanisms inside this budget, if we can establish some sort of working group for a national strategy on asbestos, how to deal with what's left. If we put a next generation of workers in these buildings, the built environment, reality is there's a lot of asbestos still out there. We banned the process, but we still have a built environment to deal with. And if we want to reduce those emissions and those pieces that we all look forward to doing, we're going to tackle this with a new generation that's not familiar with it.
No, it's a great question, Adam. We were really pleased to move forward on the asbestos ban. But like you say, as we're looking at the retrofits and the greening of the building stock that we're going to have if we're going to get to net zero, if we're going to have the efficient buildings that we know we're going to have, there's going to be a lot of construction work and a lot of renovating of existing building stock, and a lot of it continues to have asbestos. So I will look into what we're doing at that and what we can. I've heard you loud and clear on that. One of the things we actually just moved forward on is a private member's bill on recognizing cancers unique to firefighters in the work they're doing, understanding that their job exposes them to chemicals that gives them higher rates of cancers, and having a strategy that looks at that as how do we get more preventative on that. I think there's probably links we can create in there. But I really appreciate you bringing that up, Adam. Thank you. Another question from this section. Okay, go ahead. Yes, I'll give Tanya a chance.
I wasn't going to speak right again, but since you're going clockwise. One of the things that we focus on a lot at the building trades is diversity and inclusion initiatives and increasing representation. We do a lot of training at our institute here for Indigenous communities and Indigenous youth. One thing that we keep coming up against is the availability to work near home for Indigenous youth. So I know that the federal government puts a lot of money into training, whether through the UTIP grant, through Indigenous services, or different agreement holders, which is fantastic. I also know that the federal government has been really aggressive on the amount of community infrastructure spending. What I'm seeing is a disconnect between requirements and opportunities for those who are in the training programs to actually work on the community projects. So I wondered if you can comment that or address that a little bit.
Yeah, no, obviously for us, reconciliation is a huge priority for this government. And that means recognizing the gaps, the funding gaps, the housing gaps, the schooling gaps, all the gaps that have too long been the legacies of colonialism that this country has lived with and ignored for so much. So we have done a lot of investment in infrastructure, whether it's housing or whether it's new schools or new healing lodges or what have you. Ideally, we get to the point where there is an ability to actually connect the training programs and the success of Indigenous labor force, training programs and opportunities to those buildings. We're not quite there yet. It's going to take more work. We're trying to create opportunities like that. A lot of it has to do with linking it up with the provinces, and some provinces are more keen on taking reconciliation seriously than others. We've had really good success rates in British Columbia, where they're very forward-leaning on reconciliation and on partnering in really substantive ways for economic opportunities and training programs that actually lead to Indigenous construction workers on job sites in remote communities where they live or where they will live in these homes. So we are making strides on that, but I'll be honest with you, we're not at where we need to be. But I know seeing a number of young Indigenous people in the trainings programs here, it is getting there. It will get there naturally, but we should be leaning in and making it happen more. But I want to really thank you for bringing up that issue and making sure that the diversity of this country is reflected in the diversity of the trades is really important, because we're going to need more great union-trained workers throughout this country, building this country. We have new arrivals coming all the time who are looking for these good jobs. We need to make sure that we're reducing those barriers, whether it's to women, whether it's to people living with disabilities, whether it's Indigenous people, whether it's new Canadians. These are things that this government takes seriously, because unless everyone has a chance to succeed, the economy won't succeed overall. Thank you. Another question from this section here. Yes.
Barry Prescott from Teamsters Union. I know I met you a few times in Ottawa over the years, and you've always been a strong supporter of the oil and gas industry. And now with the new initiative by the government to go to EVs, I'm just wondering, I know part of your platform is that you're having trading dollars to switch the oil and gas workers over to clean energy workers. Can you expand on how that's going to be and how it will trickle down to places like the building trades?
Yeah, for sure. And the link is quite direct. We know where the world is going. You can just look at where investment dollars are flowing from everywhere around the world. People want to be moving towards solutions that are lower emissions. It's what investors are asking for. It's what consumers are asking for. Apple is making a point out of buying aluminum from Quebec because it's some of the cleanest aluminum in the world. It's something that people are looking for. I just talked about I was talking a few weeks ago about the shift we made with one of the largest steelmaking multinationals in the world. ArcelorMittal has steelmaking plants scattered around the world. They own a big one in Hamilton called Dofasco. And Dofasco, like just about every other steel plant, burns coal to melt its steel, to create its steel. We invested with them, and they committed to shift to electric arc technology for steelmaking by 2028. And that was a big win. So last summer I went there to meet with some workers and to turn sod for the new project. And they told me, actually, we're going to do it by 2026 now. We're going to do it 2 years ahead of schedule. And I said, okay, kind of sarcastically, bravo, you actually care more about the environment than we thought. They said, well, yeah. I said, okay, why did you really change it to 26 instead of 28? And they said, well, the demand for steel has flatlined around the world, particularly after COVID, but the demand for green or cleaner steel is going through the roof. We just can't keep up with it. And what we can do in Canada, particularly because in Canada we have an 83% clean grid anyway, that when we're using electricity to make our steel, we can say, look, it wasn't coal-burning plant firing the electric arc, it was hydro or nuclear, building that steel, and that's what consumers are wanting around the world. So we are going to need oil and gas for a long time as societies, as a civilization. We're just going to move towards a place where burning oil and gas for its energy is no longer going to be the kind of imperative that we have as we develop new sources of energy. So in terms of petrochemicals, in terms of all sorts of different things, there's going to be a need for oil and gas. And as we develop carbon capture and sequestration technology, we're going to be able to pull the carbon out of the natural gas and just use the hydrogen. And that's going to be a big part of it. So there's huge innovations coming. And Canada is actually extremely well positioned to be that net zero energy supplier the world needs. When the German Chancellor came over last summer to talk about hydrogen, when the President of the European Union came over a few months ago to talk about critical minerals, when the American President came over a little while ago and wanted to talk about a coherent and integrated continental energy strategy on cleaner energy, these are things that indicate that there are going to be so many jobs in this transfer. If you're a pipe fitter, whether it's natural gas or hydrogen following through, if you're building a CCUS facility or a geothermal or even a nuclear plant, those are great construction jobs that are not the oil and gas building jobs that were there in the 90s. But I know that your members and the building trades are going to be able to adapt and secure those jobs. So the worry that some people have about, oh my gosh, the oil and gas sector is going to be less relevant in a net zero world and there will be fewer jobs. I tell you, I spoke to a lot of leaders within that industry who say, actually, there are going to be so many new jobs, we're worried we're not going to be able to keep up. And that's where they are saying, yes, keep those immigration policies in, keep those training programs going, because we're going to need lots of new jobs. The world is now looking to Canada, particularly because we have that cleaner energy grid, and we're on our way to 2035 having a fully clean energy grid. We are showing leadership on fighting climate change by putting a price on pollution everywhere across the country. We are showing that we are serious and committed to it by investing massively in green energy, investing massively in cleaner technology. All those things resulted in Canada, in the EV, electric vehicles world, moving from 6th in the world in terms of battery supply chains to now being 2nd in the world in battery supply chains. Right now, all the lithium in the world, about 85% of it, comes through China. Think of all the batteries in your cell phones, in the EVs, that the world's going to need over the coming years. And what happened in Russia, and what happens when China weaponizes its commercial power, its trading power over other countries, its economic power over other countries, means people are suddenly realizing, okay, we need more resilient supply chains with partners we can trust. And they're looking to Canada. ArcelorMittal chose Canada to upgrade its steel plant because they know we are serious about moving in that green direction. Michelin is investing massively in its Nova Scotia tire plants because we're doing it in greener, responsible ways, and Canadian workers are extraordinary. Volkswagen made the decision to build the very first battery plant for Volkswagen outside of Europe, not somewhere in the United States, but although the United States really campaigned hard for it, they decided to come to St. Thomas in Ontario because combination of things. Our commitment to going where the puck is, knowing that the world is going greener towards net zero and we can be part of that, but also because of the quality of Canadian workers. If you look at the absenteeism rate in American factories versus Canadian factories, Canadians show up for work. We have so much more stability in terms of healthcare, now in terms of dental care, in terms of livable, high-quality communities, quality education, openness to new Canadians. All these advantages are the kinds of things that companies that are trying to position themselves for success over the coming decades are looking for. You layer that onto the fact that we've signed trade deals with 2/3 of the global economy. We're the only G7 country, major industrialized country, with a free trade deal with every other G7 country. And the things we've been doing around an inclusive, resilient, diverse workforce is a big selling point for companies looking for stable, strong communities to invest in. And even on the issue of reconciliation, which for a long time caused people to say, oh, I don't know if you can get things built in Canada because, Indigenous protests and challenges are a real thing. It takes a long time to get those approvals. Well, part of what we've been doing in rebuilding trust with Indigenous people in this country, which is a long and slow work, but is recognizing that these partnerships actually unlock potential. Indigenous communities want to be able to be part of building economic success for the future. They want to see things done responsibly and environmentally sound and having good jobs for generations to come. Well, those are conversations we can start having because we have recognized the legacy and the trauma and the responsibility that Canada has over what it has done in not respecting and not partnering with Indigenous peoples. So there's a lot of great advantages. It'll go back to your original question. The kinds of jobs that we're going to be creating over the coming decades in the energy sector, right across the country, but of course in places like Alberta and Saskatchewan, where there is a huge level of expertise in energy solutions already, not just oil and gas, but renewables and all other things, is really, really exciting. And that's a big part of what the budget we're putting forward in creating tax credits and programs that are going to bring in and support those investments for people who do want to build the future here in Canada. Thank you very much for your question, Barry. Another question. Yes, you in the front. Just stand up.
Good afternoon. My name is Preston Roulette. I'm with the Treaty 1 Development Corporation. I want to thank MBTA for inviting us. I guess it's not more of a question, it's more of an invite. I'd like to personally invite you. We have hosting the Treaties 1 to 11 gathering in August 3rd. 2 years ago, on August 3rd, 2021, we were going to host the Treaty 1 150th anniversary, unfortunately, because of COVID. We want to invite the late Queen and the Governor General, as it's, this country is built on treaties. But each year, through different governments, our treaties are slowly being eroded. So I'd like to invite you. We're going to have, hopefully, Treaties 1 to 11, maybe 300 communities. They'll be here this summer. And I'd like to personally invite yourself and the Governor General onto our event. And if you can provide us some sort of commitment.
I commit to you, I will look at the invitation very carefully and see what I'm able to do. As you know, I spend a lot of time throughout the year traveling to various parts of this country, Indigenous, non-Indigenous, talking with it. I know that's a big celebration. I'll make sure my team writes down the date, and we'll follow up and see what we can do. Thank you as well. Another question. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Hirat. And first of all, I want to just thank you and your government. During the pandemic, how you support us, how you manage that. Especially I remember that unit today made us mentally. So thank you for that. My question is, as a labor or middle class, and you already mentioned, and I think you're mentioning, but the recession, or is there any, or could you please, if there are long-term that can support for our income as a labor, that they can afford their mortgage, their careers, something like this. So, and the wage, they may be something like this. So, thank you so much. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Heron. Listen, cost of living concerns, the cost of paying the bills, is a huge challenge for Canadians right now. So even as in this most recent budget, one of the things that we're leaning in on is creating those great jobs for the future in critical minerals, in resources, in manufacturing, in all the kinds of solutions and infrastructure builds that are going to be necessary for the future. We also made the first part of the budget all about supports for people right now. And it's a little bit tricky because we're at a time where finally inflation is about to go down. We should hopefully, like I said, get to around 3% this summer, which will be very good news for everyone. And we do not want to put that at risk by injecting too much money willy-nilly into the economy, which is why we chose, because if we spend too much, and some provinces have been spending a lot lately, it will force the Bank of Canada to raise interest rates even more, and that takes a longer time because it costs families, and it raises mortgage rates, which is something we don't want. So we've been very, very targeted in our supports on inflation. A big piece of it, for example, is the grocery rebate that we just announced. It's going to be hundreds of dollars $467 for up to $467 for a family of 4 that qualifies for it. It'll be delivered through the GST rebate, which hits 11 million Canadians, and it should come in the coming months. It's one of those things that is going to require speedy passage through the House, and we hope that all politicians in the House of Commons support it. It's the kind of thing I think we're going to be able to see unanimous support on to make sure that that check gets out to families very, very quickly, because pressures are on now. But there's also other things that we've done, and even though it may seem obvious that, yes, that should happen through the House quickly, some other things that were obvious didn't go through the House of Commons quickly. For example, we decided last year that it was time to bring in dental benefits in Canada. There are far too many parents who can't send their kids to the dentist because they don't make enough, or they make slightly too much to qualify for the lowest income benefit for dental. They don't have insurance through work, and either their kids go without dental treatments, or they have to really more likely they have to squeeze in on a lot of other spending so that they can afford to get their kids' teeth fixed. And it's just as simple for me as saying, you know, a country as wealthy as Canada shouldn't be a country in which you can look at someone's smile and figure out how much money their parents made when they were growing up. That's not the kind of country we want to be. So we move forward on a dental program right away for kids 12 and under from families that don't have insurance or make under $90,000 a year. And it's already helped about 250,000 kids go to the dentist. By the end of this year, it'll be kids under 18, seniors, and Canadians living with disabilities. And within a few years, it'll be all Canadians making less than $90,000 who don't have dental insurance. This is something that really matters. It's obvious that it's something that's going to have tremendous well-being for all Canadians, and yet the Conservatives voted against it. So even an idea as great as a grocery rebate that's going to really tangibly help, when Conservatives say, no, 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 you can't fix kids' teeth, that's inflationary, they demonstrate that perhaps they're not there to fight for affordability as much as they have. So I'm hoping we're going to be able to get that through, but the dental care is one of the things we've done. Another thing that, again, unfortunately, Conservatives campaigned against was childcare. For 50 years, governments of all different stripes have known, it was one of the first recommendations on the Commission on the Status of Women from 50 years ago, that childcare is one of the most powerful opportunities to level the playing field, to get women into the workforce, to support families, to give kids the best start in life. And yet nothing was done on it until we had a window after the pandemic where so many people had suddenly seen what happens when the kids are staying at home and you're trying to work and realize it just doesn't work, that we were able to leap on that and make it happen. And actually, to Manitoba's credit, they're one of the first provinces to get to $10 a day, a couple of years ahead of schedule. And that $10 a day child care, Tanya was just talking about it coming back from maternity leave, makes a huge difference. I mean, at a time where the cost of living is going up for everyone, having affordable child care saves hundreds of dollars a month for many families. You layer that on top of the Canada Child Benefit that we brought in 2018, that Conservatives also campaigned against. We've seen a reduction of poverty of about 2.7 million people across this country, lifting about 500,000 kids out of poverty over the past few years. And these are the kinds of things that are not just social programs or anti-poverty programs. They are programs that actually create prosperity as women can get into the workforce, as our workforce is growing, long consequences. So these are the kinds of things that we're going to continue to do. And the best thing we can do to make sure that you're able to afford your mortgage, afford groceries, all those sorts of things, or afford your rent, is continue to grow the economy, continue to build this country by working with MBT and building trades across the country, but also make sure that we're supporting hardworking families with initiatives like the Canada Workers Benefit, that again, for families with no kids but have real challenges, it's a top-up on their salaries to be able to make sure that they're much better off working Okay, these are the kinds of things that we're going to continue to do because we want you to succeed. We need you to succeed. So thank you, Haren. Another question? Yeah. It's coming right there.
Hey, Mr. Trudeau. So I'm a crane apprentice.
And what's your name? Sorry.
My name's Mac Johnson. Kind of off topic, but I was wondering, is there something good you could say about Mr. Poilievre and how he's... sorry, I'm not trying to throw a wrench at you or anything like that, but a lot of Canadians feel that the conversations, because you do welcome criticization, and I guess that's his job right now, but a lot of people feel that the conversations back and forth are not going anywhere. Is there something you and him could work on to maybe bring Canadians together that are across the aisle?
Yeah. Well, for example, in the fall, we doubled the GST rebate, and it was something that he supported, he approved of, and we were able to move that very quickly through the House, so people got that support right away. So there are things we can work on. I think one of the challenges that is always there for a leader of the opposition in this country is you get into a trap of just opposing everything and not necessarily proposing things. And I think one of the things that a lot of us would like to hear from him, and there's certainly an opening to do it, is him talking about what his actual solutions would be. He doesn't do town halls like this. He doesn't take a lot of questions from media, so it's sort of hard to see how he's actually going to solve these challenges. He's very good. As we say good things about him, he's very good at communicating straightforward messages on YouTube, on all sorts of different ways. I think it would benefit us all as a country if he were to actually propose a little bit more. Nice things I can say about it other than that, look, anyone who chooses to serve their country, anyone who chooses up to put their face on the lawn sign and put their name on a ballot is worthy of a certain amount of respect because it's a hard job, it's a hard life on families. He has a young family. I had a young family too when I started in this. They're now teenagers and it's a challenge. But if we could get to a place of a little more civil discourse, because one of the things with politics is there's always been, part of our political system requires that the opposition challenge the government on pretty much everything. It's something that, it's the way that Westminster, when you're in government and you know that someone is there with the power to put everything you do, or that people are able to make choices about whether they want this government to continue or they want a different government to come in. But democracies have always worked best around a shared set of facts, right? The right to left spectrum is at its simplest version, the further right you go, the more you say, okay, everyone should be left on their own, and if they're successful, they should be able to keep more of their success. And you go all the way to the left end of the spectrum, it says, no matter how hard you work, no matter how successful you are, everyone should make roughly the same amount of money. And those two extremes don't have any place where people say, okay, give more tax breaks to businesses for everyone else and bring the economy along well, and that's a good thing. That's more of a right-wing perspective. And on a more left-wing perspective, it's like, no, you can provide great schools and great opportunities for everyone else, but nobody gets too rich. That's sort of the left-wing perspective. I'm a liberal, which puts me sort of in the middle, where I'm trying to grow, making sure that everyone... But debates in politics aren't really about that anymore. And of course, I explained it in the best possible light for liberals, as many of you noticed, but that's sort of a town hall. But a lot of political debates now are more about personal attacks than they are about what policies or where you are in the ideological spectrum. And that's something that has, I think, weakened our democracies around the world. When Donald Trump got elected, he was able to get a huge amount of support based on resentment and anger that political parties and political systems in the United States had for too long ignored the middle class, and people were rightly angry and say, well, why should I continue to support a system, burn it down, or at least completely transform it? And unfortunately, he wasn't really able to deliver in any way that helped the middle class in the United States, because his focus was on getting elected and stoking up anger and outrage, not actually on providing solutions. So what we need to get back to as a country is delivering those solutions and having conversations about, okay, Mr. Polyev, you don't agree with our investment in dental care. Why? He hasn't ever said that, for example. So I think if we get to him, and I don't engage in personal attacks, even 15, for all that he was doing personal attack ads against me, I was very, very crisp on my policy differences, where we disagree on the ideas for the country, but we never got into personal attacks. And if we could have politics with a lesser level of personal attacks, I think people would be paying more attention and engage in a more constructive way. But thank you for your question, Matt. Thank you. Another question. Anyone from over here?
So my name's Stephen Sprange. I am a proud member of IBW. Got a bunch of my students here. I am a electrical trades high school electrical trades pre-employment instructor. So one thing we do a lot is we discuss sustainable energy. And I know there's been a lot of talk about electrical energy. So we do have a very outdated so that we can support these EVs and all the other electrical loads that are going to be on the system.
Yeah, no, listen, that's a great question. It's something we've actually chosen to tackle because one of the things that makes Canada very appealing right now is the fact that we have, certainly in jurisdictions like Manitoba where hydro is such a clean and clear solution, there's a lot of interest in investing in places where people can build factories and build things. But as countries around the world and as investors around the world say, okay, let's build more things in Canada, we're going to need a lot more clean electricity. And that's where one of the things that we did in this most recent budget is we put forward a tax break program for clean electricity. Provincial energy companies like Manitoba Hydro can actually qualify for federal tax breaks, which has never been done before, to help them build that cleaner grid of the future. Whether it's with interties, whether it's getting back to the nuclear expertise that Manitoba used to have and that could have again. The question around small modular reactors is really, really exciting because we're going to need, I mean, for all the wind power and solar power that we are going to be able to have and generate, we're going to need reliable baseload power, and nuclear is going to be a key part of that in the coming years, and that's why we're starting putting into that. How we create smarter grids as well, grids where you can have microgeneration feeding into the grid and out of the grid. Everyone who has a car plugged in at home charging overnight because it's an EV could also be pumping some of that energy into the grid. For example, in the evenings, you get home from work at 5 with your electric vehicle, you plug it into the charging. It's unlikely to take a 3-hour trip that night. Energy from your car to help the peak load as everyone's cooking dinner and turning on the microwave and doing the laundry before going to bed. And that actually requires a smarter grid than we have right now. So those are the kinds of things that a lot of people are thinking about and we're trying to invest in. But our ability to get there is going to require a lot of really thoughtful people to be building it, like you and quite frankly, the students you're training up. So keep it up. No, thank you very much, Stephen. All right, question from here. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Sandra. I saw you on Canada's Drag Race, and I found it but my question is, how do you plan on helping women in trades?
There is a lot more work to do to get more women into the trades. We know that there is a real need to increase the workforce in trades in general. And yes, some of it will happen with immigration, but a lot of it should happen by building options to succeed. I mean, we know is about using, fancier and fancier and more sophisticated tools and, the kind of equipment that no longer requires the kind of brute force that it would to swing a pickaxe. Yes, there's definitely need to be physically. There are so many opportunities for women in the trades that actually the way the work is done, because everything shifts as you bring time, commitment of mine, but it's very much so for the trades, particularly when we have good childcare, for we've got a number of programs to encourage and invest in women in apprenticeships. Part of what we're doing around some of the new agreements we're signing are going to specifically have, when we sign with the province on big infrastructure projects, the requirement for community benefit programs. And that, largely put, is focused on 3 different areas. Making sure that there are enough quality apprentices hired for a particular job to make sure that we're actually using the full workforce. Making sure that there are enough women in the workforce, that you're hitting a certain percentage and qualifying for it that way. And then making sure there are enough Indigenous opportunities as well within the community benefits. So this is something that we are pushing hard on, and we're going to continue to, because, boy, do we need you succeeding in the trades. But thank you for that. Another question? Yeah.
My name is Arnold Manham. I was wondering about, like, for Indigenous people, like, if they don't have a place to stay in the city or, like, to get into the trades.
Yeah. One of the challenges we have and that we're grappling with is the urban Indigenous populations. The federal government has direct responsibility for reserve communities across the country, and we're working on building more housing and more opportunities there. But in urban spaces, there is a bit of lack of cohesion in the approach between the provinces, the municipalities, and the federal government. We're working on that. We know that there's an urban Indigenous challenge around building housing that we've put significant money towards so that you do have those opportunities. But we also want to get to a place where we're creating more training centers, more opportunities, so you don't have to go to the big cities and leave your communities to do that. And that's part of the economic reconciliation path that we're walking as well. There are no easy answers for it, but I know there are lots of programs that are looking at drawing Indigenous youth into the trades, and as they do that, recognizing the full suite of challenges. It's not just giving you a break on the tuition and helping you buy tools. It's also helping you find a place to stay while you're doing the training. And those sorts of things are things that we're working on with labor across this country. Thank you for your question, Arnold. Another question? Yeah.
Hi there, my name is Andy Spence. I'm a regional representative at Workers United. I'm a rep there. I was thinking about the question, what I would ask you, but I guess I'm going to go back to this question. It's about the wealth of First Nations people. Many people are in poverty, low income, and I come from a family of low income. Same with our generations before, and probably because of policies in place. I can only imagine that's the reason.
Not probably, definitely because of politics.
And so I guess, and you probably answered this a few times, but what is this government going to do to raise the wealth of First Nations people in Canada?
Well, first of all, understanding why we got here and how we got here is really important. Residential schools aren't a thing of the past. Even though the impact of residential schools, the intergenerational trauma, continues in very, very meaningful way. Taken away from them. Their ability to know how to parent taken away from them by systematic structures that try to erase their identity. The consequences of that now in terms of addiction rates and incarceration rates and poverty rates in Indigenous people. Of policies of forced assimilation, of colonial thinking, of erasing the Indian from the child, of all those things that are the legacy that we have to contend with. So reconciliation is more than just apologizing for the past. It's understanding that currently we are still living the full legacy of the colonial mindsets that had, regardless of the improvements we're making. With a group of residential school survivors a few years ago, was that we know how, but residential schools that were busy teaching Indigenous kids that their language had no value, that their culture had no value, that their identity had no value, were paralleled with the fact that every other school in the country, every non-Indigenous school, was also teaching to non-Indigenous kids that Indigenous languages had no value, that Indigenous knowledge and culture had no value, that the Indigenous identity had no value or worth. So what we have to undo is more than just a relationship between the federal government and Indigenous peoples. And heavens knows we're doing a lot in trying to do that. But it's also a shift in mindset amongst all Canadians who were taught this lie. Another thing that struck me was, and we all know that the suicide rates in Indigenous communities, particularly for young people, is through the roof, and it's a real crisis we have to continue to address. But it's not every Indigenous community. And in communities, in some communities, you could see rates of youth suicide that are lower than non-Indigenous communities, for example. Where as you look into it, is those are the communities traditional knowledge and culture is taught and celebrated, where elders are able to pass on that language and that culture, and there's a pride in identity and culture that allows you to be resilient in the face of challenges and not fall into those ideations and the challenges that go with it. So we know what the solution is. We just have to transform our systems in really, really fundamental ways. And that, unfortunately, takes more than just a few years. It is the work of a generation to undo what happened for centuries. But you're absolutely right that getting there requires a level of economic resilience and success, of not just celebrating identity and culture and language, but allowing people to support their family, their community, and flourish in this country. Complete, fully formed Indigenous people. And that's the work we're trying to do, but it's still going to take a lot of work and a lot of partnership to do that. But thank you very much for bringing it up. Okay, question from this section. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Kevin Rebeck. I'm with the Manitoba Federation of Labour. And I was glad to see a lot of investments through the last federal budget, particularly healthcare, which is an area that's needed a lot of attention. Lots of right-wing premiers have been calling on the federal government to have less strings attached. I would caution and say that most Canadians would like more strings attached to protect a strong universal public healthcare system. The gap that I saw in the budget, though, was I was hopeful to hear the announcement of the creation of a national pharmacare program, the missing piece to our healthcare system. There are still far too many Canadians that can't afford the medication they need. Of a plan for several years now.
No, great question. First on healthcare and strings attached. Decreed that the provinces, and that's specifically healthcare and K-12 education and things like that. So the province has the responsibility for delivering healthcare in this country. The federal government does have a responsibility around healthcare, but it's primarily two things. One is contributing to its funding, ensure that the terms of the Canada Health Act are met, which is a system in which the quality of care or the quality of your access to care depends on the size of your bank account. That's something that Canadians intuitively know, and those conservative politicians who sort of say, oh no, if you pull people out of the public system because they're willing to pay, you'll create more space in the public system for people who can't pay. We know what it actually means. It means a lessening of quality in the public system as people migrate towards a private system, and you do end up with a two-tier system that doesn't serve anyone in this country. So we are going to continue to stand very strongly on that. And part of our investments in healthcare and our deals with the provinces don't directly include strings, because it's not up to the federal government to say, well, there should be this many nurses on the floor on this particular type of ward. We do not want to micromanage healthcare delivery, but we do want to make sure there are better outcomes in healthcare than before. So the way we did that is, first of all, three main areas in which we know significant improvements have to be made. Access to primary care doctors, access to healthcare, and the number of visitors and primary care teams across the country. Second, better work on mental health, and making sure people can access the appropriate mental health care in a timely way, because mental health is health, and that is really important. Third is making sure we're supporting our healthcare workers who are stretched thin because of the pandemic, who need relief, who need a new wave of healthcare workers to come into the program, and into the system. So that's what we're doing. And fourth, the big one for me is provinces are now have to be absolutely transparent around data collection. When I discovered at the beginning of the pandemic that we had no way of finding out how many COVID cases were going on in different parts of the country to be able to compare what this national pandemic looked like, we were getting faxes in from different provinces with numbers on them that was like, we're not aligning in the way they were collecting, the way they were evaluating. We were like, okay, yes, we have 13 different jurisdictions in this country, provinces and territories, 13 different medical systems, and that's fine. It allows for innovation, allows for responsiveness to the needs of the provinces, it respects the Constitution, but we have to be able to know what's working and what's not in a very clear way. So measure data, making sure people have proper access and control over their health data, all those things is how we make sure that there are real results and outcomes on this. On pharmacare, it's absolutely the unfinished work of universal health care. More and more sophisticated pharmaceuticals are a solution to what was before either institutional treatments or surgical interventions. We know that drugs are going to be more and more important in how we keep people healthy in the coming years. So we're doing a number of things. We created a Canadian Drug Agency to increase the buying power. We're looking at formulary improvements so that we can actually work it right across the country. We move forward with a pilot project in PEI around pharmacare that is very promising. But to govern is to choose, and the national pharmacare program was not something we were able to move on now. We're still committed to moving forward on it. We're still committed to making sure that Canada is not a place where you have to choose between taking your medication or eating, as unfortunately too many people are. But moving forward on dental right now, moving forward on improving our healthcare system, which will have better data, which will allow us to understand exactly what's needed around pharmacare, will bring us towards that in the next steps. But it was one of those choices we had to say, okay, we're doing this now. We're continuing the work on bringing down drug prices, which has happened in this country, but we're not yet, not in this budget anywhere, able to do that. Thanks for your question. I think we'll take, okay, I've got 3 hands up. I'll take those 3 last questions, one after the other. You, and then you. So starting with you. You'll ask the 3 questions, and I'll answer them in one shot.
Thanks for coming by. We greatly appreciate you showing up to this wonderful place.
It is.
Greatly appreciate all the young people that you're going to help along. And we're very happy to have you, and looking around this room to see everybody that helped to make this place. And we appreciate you contributing to it. Just going to ask you a little question about
Sure.
the future.
What's your name?
Clark Saunders.
Clark.
At 1258.
Pleasure.
How can the federal government help strengthen building trades to ensure we have capable, skilled workforce ready for the future? Thank you.
Okay, next question. You, sir? Yep. So you can give him the mic.
My name is Sanjay. First, I would like to say thank you during the news to come out every single day. What was happening compared to what had happened in our neighbor countries. You are providing updates every time. So thank you. Thank you for keeping me and my family safe. My question is about the immigration. My mom and dad is visiting India. They both passed away together. I had to hold one service for them. And to do the last rites of my parents, I want to hold the service here. And I want to be my nephew part of the service here. That was my mom's wish, parents. And whenever I apply, they keep refusing my nephew. They said he will not leave the country. Can you please do something during this time? Because this is the only one time we all have to go through this. So in this case, if they do something, we can satisfy them what they want, or we can talk to somebody. And I want to make sure my mom's parents will rest in peace. And I can't do the service because of my nephew. And they keep saying, oh, he will not leave the country. So I don't know what to do in this case. Please help me. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjay. And last question. Yes, sir.
Thank you so much. My name is Uche Nwankwo. And just from the last speaker, I want to appreciate you also for the great work you did during the uncertainty period of the COVID-19, to the point that some countries in Africa were wishing that they had Justin Trudeau as a president. So it was really incredible. And I appreciate, it's been a long time I haven't seen you closer this way, so I appreciate seeing you again. So I have actually, everyone would have bothered in international relationship. So the first question is about, I mean, you touched on that when you were talking about taxation. And those are the critical issues that people bring forward, unemployment rate, inflation, and taxation. They use it. Sometimes they distort the information that being stored. So I was out on the street on Saturday, and one of the door knocking businessman and employer, and he was lamenting and complaining about the corporate tax and how businesses are moving away from Canada. And he told me about his friend who refused to hire more people because of when I tried to explain to him the different tax system and why countries employ different taxation system based on security and all that. But looking at the information when I got back, I realized that corporate tax is not as high as some other country compared to US and all that. So but my question is, how would you be able to, I know you mentioned that, communicate the information to understand in a very clear term the taxation system, and he was making reference to this a lot, and a lot of people are moving away because of that. That's one question. The second question is also on our indigenous issue. Yeah, I appreciate that there has been a lot of improvement during your government. On relationship with indigenous people. So not only just reciting the Truth and Reconciliation, but actual action towards that. So there has been a lot of improvement. But there's still high rate of unemployment, food insecurity, water insecurity, water poverty among the indigenous communities. Currently, I'm planting wild rice in Broken Head Ojibwe First Nation. There's high rate of food in the provinces. So my question to improve these areas, water poverty, food insecurity, and that I'll talk about language and other, if we see that is still reminding us about colonization that is not taken away yet. I know some universities are trying to restructure their curriculum to reflect indigenous perspective in their program, but I think a lot needs to be done. So I don't know if I confuse myself or you with all the questions.
That's okay. I think I can manage. But thank you for your question, Uche. Clark, how are we building a workforce for the future? The first part is something that you guys are doing really well in the building trades, highlighting all the great jobs that come from being a skilled tradesperson and about their future, about being able to, jobs. Well, working in the trades is a really key way of not just doing something rewarding where you're building and you're creating and you're innovating and you're contributing to your community, but you're also able to have a solid paycheck and support a family and build a community around it. So the work you're doing, encouraging young people through the philosophy degrees, wondering how they can't, why they're stuck working at Starbucks and not, building the kind of future that they want for themselves. Whereas whatever the kinds of jobs that you have on offer in the building trades is huge. Value that. Particularly as we see challenges with more offshoring, more AI jobs happening, the value of the real work of building communities and building a future in place and everything that it gives to, there is a huge amount of pride that people can and should take in the trades that we have to do a better job of communicating to young people who are growing up in a world where that hasn't been valued in the right way, and they're missing great opportunities to build strong opportunities and careers for themselves. So we'll keep working on that union within the building trades. Sanjay, thank you for your comments on COVID. And I've said to fellow leaders around the world who were asking about how Canada had such an incredible low rate of COVID deaths, such an incredibly high rate of vaccination, and such a fast economic recovery. We got back to full employment from the jobs we'd lost before COVID 6 months ahead of the United States, and their recovery was pretty strong. And as much as politicians like to take credit for being awesome, it wasn't about me. It was about Canadians themselves. But the one thing, reassure people that their institutions were going to be there for them. That's why getting the CERB out the door as quickly about economic support, it was also about moral support. It was also people knowing, oh, okay, the government's got my back. We're going to be able to get through this unprecedented, unstable moment by leaning on each other. And when people could do that, they actually trusted more the public health authorities, they trusted more the doctors and the experts saying how to keep ourselves safe. And when time to get vaccinated, we had one of the highest vaccination rates in the world, because people knew this was what we do to get through this. And it's Canadians themselves that got us through COVID, and I just had the privilege of being in this position to serve them through some pretty difficult times, and to be able to ground my approach in science and data every step of the way. Around the immigration question and visitor visas, well, it also starts with COVID. We closed our borders for like 2 years. And that really had direct consequences on our immigration system, on the people we were bringing in, and the backlog that we're trying to move through since we reopened and our economy is going, particularly with labor shortages, has put a lot of strain on for visitor visas for people coming for weddings and funerals and occasions like that. But I will say two things. First of all, what we've been able to do recently in accelerating the process, in making clear that we need to be growing our economy and our population, so we should be a little more enthusiastic about bringing people in even for a few weeks to come to an occasion. And that's one of the shifts that we've brought the times down. The other thing I will tell you is we have two MPs here who are outstanding, who are excellent at immigration processes. Terry Duguid, who I think this is your riding, right? Nope. Is this your riding, Kevin? Very close to your riding. Okay. Depending on where you live, one of these two gentlemen would be more than happy to help you out, making sure that we're doing everything we can to bring your nephew in here. That's something that MPs do, those processes and those interactions with the family. Sanjay. And you had a couple of questions. Our corporate tax rates are competitive, particularly since the OECD is moving forward in a global corporate tax rate, so the companies don't start shopping around. I mean, there was a thing about certain companies setting up in Ireland for a long while because they were a way of sort of offshoring some of the things, so they weren't paying the same kinds of tax on because they were in a lower tax jurisdiction. Well, we just came to an agreement around global minimum corporate tax, around to lower tax jurisdictions, and Canada will be fully competitive on that. And actually, when it comes to corporate taxes, we are not only competitive, but our healthcare system, our strong, stable communities, dental care coming in, the fact that Canada is the best educated country in the OECD, in a collection of all the most developed nations, which probably makes it one of the best educated countries in the world, is a huge advantage for people coming in. My experience with certain business owners means no matter what the corporate tax level is, they will complain about taxes being too high, because obviously business people want to be able to keep more of their profits. As a government, we've been doing a good job of closing a number of loopholes to make sure that people who are successful, everyone else can have the opportunity to have livable communities and good roads and hospitals and schools and all the things that tax should do on that, obviously. On Indigenous, well, you mentioned the Indian Act. The Indian Act is a colonial relic that should be abolished, absolutely. But a federal government deciding we're going to end the Indian Act overnight without working with Indigenous communities in their pace and almost. So what we are doing, there are a number of Indigenous nations and First Nations communities that have moved beyond the Indian Act, that are no longer part of the Indian Act. Self-governing nations that have their own standalone responsibilities and opportunities. And that is a place we definitely want to get to for all communities. But if I go to see a particular community that's right now under the Indian Act and say, okay, we'll get rid of the Indian Act, right now they'll say, no, wait. Here's our priority right now. Let us set up a really good healthcare system in our community. We'll start running that because that's the priority we have. And as we get that going, well, then we can add more things and we can move towards, not needing to be in the Indian Act anymore, but we'll do it at our pace, in our way, and we'll work out the deals that work to you. Or maybe we're going to start with education. Or maybe we're going to start with some other thing. No matter how good the solution might seem for smart people in Ottawa on how to fix this community and its problems, if it's not a solution that was built in consultation and in leadership by the community, it will be the wrong solution, no matter how theoretically right it is. And that was the problem of colonial in 2015. I remember sitting down with a particularly challenged community that you would probably know, and said, okay, tell me what you need. He said, look, the legacy of colonial, great. All that message that you've been giving the states to governments that haven't listened ends now. Yes, I agree with everything in this letter. How can we help? What can we do that you need right now? And he had never been asked that. And he didn't even know how to begin to answer that. Because they had spent all their time saying, we need help, we need improvement, we need everything, and Ottawa wasn't listening. And then we show up and say, okay, what is it? Do you need a new health center? Do you need a new road? Do you need a new self-governing agreement? Do you need an elders lodge? What do you want? What do you need here? We're here to do that. It's like, nobody ever asked me before that. So before you can answer that question, there is, first of all, trust to build and to rebuild. But there's also capacity to build as well. So how do you figure out what your priorities are as a community? You have to figure out the best way to spend that in your community. That takes time to build. And that's the long, slow work right now, that if you don't fix things quickly, there's going to be more kids slipping through the cracks. More people living in mold-infested homes. More challenges with boil water advisories. We should just get on it right now and fix it. Except the sustainable solution. So of fixing things right now and fixing things well for the coming, not just generations, but eons, is the real heavy lifting of reconciliation. And I have to say that every step of the way I have been amazed and inspired by the patience and the hopefulness and the willingness of Indigenous people, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, to still believe that we can build a better future together. After everything this country has done to knock down, to damage, to injure, to assimilate, to negate Indigenous people in this country over centuries, the fact that Indigenous people are saying, yeah, that was all really bad, but okay, let's try and figure this out together now despite all the pain you have caused nature, speaks more of and the strength of and the depth of character of Indigenous peoples across the country. And don't get me wrong, there are lots of people who are rightly furious and will be angry for a long time at everything that's done, and that's totally understandable. But there are lots of others who are saying, okay, now there's an opportunity, let's build, let's transform this country in the way that it was always supposed to be when the first Indigenous peoples welcomed in settlers and said, okay, you can share this land with us, let's build this together, let's build a better future together, because we're open to diversity, we're open to welcoming in people, and then, got themselves betrayed and sat on. But now we get to build the future in a very real way that is true to the values of the Canada we want to build. And in that, we will continue doing it in the right way and continue to pledging ourselves to the long, slow work of reconciliation while we move as quickly as we can to end the most egregious. Thank you. So, thank you all for being here tonight. I hope things, or at least the way I and this government is trying to think about tackling various problems. There are no magic solutions. There's no easy answers. There is only a lot of hard work ahead of all of us. But one of the things about Canada is it's Canada so incredibly well for the future. So yeah, times are tough, better, steadily, and they're getting better because Canadians have been pulled there. Of strong communities and success for the middle class, labor unions in general have done, is a key part of that story. So I want to thank you in the years to make sure Canada continues to give every possible opportunity to all who live in this country. Merci beaucoup, mes chers amis. Thank you all so much.